stood face to face with Hitler to try to stop him. But if you look at the history, Antifa at the time was just the military wing of the German Communist Party, the KDP. And in fact, before Nazis took over Germany, they would sometimes team up with the fascist Nazi party to fight against other liberal groups in Germany that they claim were also fascist. As a matter of fact, KDP and Antifa said that they were the only anti-fascist group. Everybody else was fascist. It's very much like today. Now, to be fair to modern Antifa, there's no direct connection between that Antifa and modern Antifa. That being said, it's the same way how modern neo-Nazis have no direct lineage to German Nazis, but they still share the same violent ideology, both neo-Nazis with German Nazis and both modern Antifa with the German Antifa of the time. But modern Antifa actually comes from the 1980s and 1990s when there was a resurgence of the punk movement in both in the UK and here in America. This is kind of how I got involved. In the 1990s, Antifa, the skinhead movement, and the anarcho-punk movement were inseparable. When I started getting involved into this movement, this music movement, it was in 2009, and that's kind of how I got roped into a lot of these different things. I would go to a show, I would meet people, they would invite me to protest, and then it just met more and more people. But that doesn't really talk about the tactics. What are their tactics? Well, everything that Antifa does can be boiled down to one thing, and it is called direct action. Direct action is the name of the game, and it means to directly take matters into your own hands, to enact political change. It is a form of vigilante justice. Just as I said earlier, if things don't go for in Antifa's way, in a quote-unquote democratic way, they're willing to use threats, intimidation, and violence to get their way. And in fact, this is something that I did as an anarchist. I was at countless protests, many, I don't even know how many, but I really wish that all I protested were Nazis, because there were some incidents that probably shouldn't have done. To give you an example, about a group of 10 or 15 of us, we went to Orange County once, and we decided that we didn't like this CEO because he was the head of a company that supposedly had a contract with a French airline to bring monkeys to America for animal testing. I don't know if that's true. That's just what someone told me. So we showed up in this guy's house every Sunday, and we would yell nasty things to his face, or rather to his window. We did this in broad daylight and in front of children. We didn't care. We'd yell the same nasty things that you'd hear Antifa yell at Nazis, call him a fascist pig, saying that he should kill himself because he was an effing animal killer. The sad part, the funny thing is that he was never home. And the sad part is that we knew he was never home, because the point of us showing up to this guy's house was never to have a conversation with him. It wasn't to sit down at the table, have an agreement, compromise, none of that. The purpose of us showing to his house and making a ruckus was for the neighbors. We were counting on the fact that when we left, the neighbors stayed behind, and they knew when he would come back. So we were hoping that they would go to his house and say, you need to leave this community, because if you don't, you and I are going to have problems. That's modern Antifa for you. But the mission of modern Antifa is to silence opposition through fear and intimidation. And in fact, anarchists have a term for this type of political violence. It's called propaganda by the deed. Propaganda by the deed means to enact political violence against another with the intent and the hope that others will see this and be inspired and take up arms as well. And don't ever give in to the lie that Antifa is only fighting fascists, because they are not. They are an anti-American and anti-liberty movement. And just back to Mark Bray's book, he writes that at the heart of the anti-fascist outlook is a rejection of the classical liberal phrase, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. After Auschwitz and Treblinka, Anti-fascists committed themselves to fighting to the death the ability of organized Nazis to say anything. But he doesn't stop there. He continues by saying, thus, anti-fascism is an illiberal politics of social revolution applied to fighting the far right, not only literal fascists. But he doesn't stop there, because if you keep reading the book, he talks about everyday fascists. What are everyday fascists? Well, he explains it's just people who hold quote unquote oppressive politics. Well, what is those oppressive politics? Well, people who are wearing socialism sucks shirts. If you are against socialism, one of the most dangerous ideologies in all of human history, all of a sudden you are a fascist that should be attacked and silenced. The modern Antifa is trying to silence the everyday fascists, which are just conservative and libertarian students. He, like many other anarchists, think that any hint of libertarianism or conservatism is the far right. And in fact, I used to share that idea. In 2011, again, I remember going to a library, a bookstore in Pasadena. And I went to look, this is when I was starting to question conservatives and started really seeking out more information about them. And I asked the book attendant, I'm looking for books on radical politics. He responded, well, what are you thinking? Do you want to read some Marx or Engels? I'll find it for you. I responded, I'm looking for the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers were written by the founders, people who died for the cause of liberty. But according to Antifa, they are far right-wing radicals who should be feared. Antifa is so far left that any hint of libertarianism or conservatism or just liberty in general is the far right to them. Now, many of you may be wondering, how in the world did I end up leaving Antifa? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. Not so much leaving, but becoming a conservative. But at the same time, I never even thought I would ever join a movement like Antifa in the first place. And the truth is, it's really complicated. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm from a small town in Mexico. It's called Chimalhuacan. Have you ever tried to find it on Google? You probably won't find it, and it's probably because you can't spell it. But if you're able to spell it and find it, you'll find that it was nicknamed the trash can of Mexico City. This is a picture I found online. I lived among this. And thanks to coronavirus, I was home for a while, so I started looking to old photographs. So I found a couple of pictures of family pictures. On the left, you see it's right up outside my house, and look at the trash in the background. And on the right-hand side, it's a picture of my sister and myself. And if you look at the back, it's just a pile of trash. Here's a more modern picture. It is so much more beautiful, yet it still looks like trash. If any of you ever seen the movie Elysium with Matt Damon, it's set in a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, but instead of going to the trashy parts of Los Angeles, they just went to my hometown. So I came to America when I was about 9, and I struggled learning a new language. So a lot of the times I would watch Spanish TV, Telemundo, Univision, and a lot of the things that they peddle are just anti-American propaganda. But it didn't stop there. I was also in school. I had multiple teachers in middle school and in high school who, instead of teaching me what they were supposed to, would stand in front of the classroom and lecture us about why we were stupid if we believed in God. That's specifically a biology teacher I had both in 7th grade and in 10th grade. So by the time I joined Antifa, I was already a prime candidate to join this anti-American movement. I mean, when I started protesting Nazis, I thought that America stood with them. Why else would police officers defend a Nazi's right to free speech? I didn't understand at the time that it's a much more complicated issue. It's not black and white. And if we don't protect the rights of everyone, that's only going to hurt our republic and our democracy, because then you give the government the power to silence you. Yet another problem with Antifa is their demand for loyalty. For example, in 2012, when I started asking questions, it was because I was introduced to Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell, two great economists who I find incredibly interesting. But I I didn't agree with them. I thought they were interesting, but whatever. So I started going and I started reading books. As a matter of fact, I have a little book here that, again, because of Corona, I started going through my old stash. It's called The Accumulation of Freedom. And in one of the pages, I found some of my old annotations about how I'm questioning a lot of the ideas that they had here, based on these two gentlemen. But I didn't find answers in books, so I started trying to talk to more people, and of course, the people who were interested in my stories or basically my politics were other members of Antifa. And for being an anarchist at the time, that was the very first time that I was called a capitalist pig. Because as soon as I started asking questions, I became the enemy. I started being harassed, and I just decided, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you guys because I don't want to be like you. Luckily, around this time, I was starting college. So I decided to start a Young Americans for Liberty chapter, which is thanks to the Leadership Institute that Adam Weinberg, who helped me at the time. And the reason I started a Young Americans for Liberty chapter as opposed to a general political club is because there was already political clubs on campus, yet there was no conservatives there. You have to find the libertarians and the conservatives and draw them out. So I started, even though I didn't agree with everything that y'all had to say, I started one so I could talk to more libertarians. It was thanks to them that they convinced me over time to become a libertarian. But it's funny because even though I wasn't a libertarian when I started the club, as soon as people found out I was part of a right-wing club, people hated me. We received harassment from administration time and time again. We lost our advisor multiple times, just to give you an example. Our fifth advisor, he told us that the administration continually told him that if he wanted a future with the school, he would stop being our mentor. And we were incredibly lucky because he was a libertarian as well. So he believed in our cause. It's a college club. So a lot of the activism we did was both, some of it was serious. We talked about national debt or NSA spying, but some of it was just about campus politics. One time we all decided to protest the student government, and we decided to call them a bunch of communists, just to satirical. And I knew that a lot of them liked My Little Pony. So I created a little collage from some stuff I found that looked a little like this. It's not important. I mean, it's just two pictures put together. That's all I did. We stood with a big sign right outside the student government office, and that angered them. The student government advisor walked out, and she took a picture of the sign. She took a picture of us. She documented the whole area. And then I went up to her and I asked her, well, it's pretty funny, right? She just responded, well, we'll see what the lawyers have to say about this. She was threatening to sue me for something that I knew was 100% protected by the First Amendment. And even though my speech was satirical, I would win in court, it felt like the First Amendment didn't apply here. And in fact, we were incredibly lucky because they forgot to copyright their own logo. So they had absolutely no case against us. But at that time, we decided, you know what? We need to do something about this. We looked online for legal groups that could help us. And we found the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, which is a great legal group out of Philadelphia. By the way, I should say, if you are a conservative student that's facing legal challenges or any liberal bias, let me know, because I'll connect you with a legal group to make sure, and I'll help you fight back, because that's really what we needed when I was in school, somebody to help us fight against the administration. But when we filed suit, it was a painful few months. It's not pretty. People hated us even more. And that still persists to this day. About a year after everything ended, I was ready to graduate, and there was an administrator at an event who shook my hand. And instead of saying thank you, we'll miss you, something, she'd just say, well, we won't miss you. It was a painful few months when we filed suit. but somehow we ended up winning. And the sad part is that that was the second time within 9 years that they had been sued for the exact same thing. I really wish I got the $110,000, but lawyers are expensive and they work pro bono. Nonetheless, we never did it for the money. We did it to change their policies and change campus culture on campus. We removed a lot of their unconstitutional policies. Now, as I mentioned, I've been an activist for about 10 years now. 6, almost 7 now. I've been a conservative. But what happened to me in a tiny community college is happening to countless of conservative students across the nation. I want to give you a few different examples. This is UC Berkeley, February 1st, 2017. By any means necessary, decided to organize a protest because a conservative club wanted to bring a conservative speaker. Well, that turned into a riot and it cost Northern Californians $100,000 in property damage. But let me show you a video, a more recent video from Binghamton University, where a group of 4 or 5 conservative students were tabling, just talking about their ideas. Well, that prompted this. Now, of course, 5 people showing up. Sorry that there was no sound in the video. Sorry about that. But what you can see is a mob of 200 leftist activists who decided to show up, and they just started harassing them, yelling at them. This woman who you see on the screen said that you're white, therefore I don't care about what you believe. But unfortunately, this is something that we see commonly. The first time I saw it was at California State University Northridge, where my friend decided to hold a sign, which led to 100 leftist activists surround him, and the campus security was forced to walk him to his car because they feared for his safety. But it's happened at Kent State University, at Pennsylvania, and also in Sacramento State University. Unfortunately for Sacramento, they also experience violence on their campus. I'm sorry if you can't hear this. Basically, the conservative student is asking him, what have I done? And he's saying, like, you're harassing me. And now here, he's yelling that mother effing, you're dead. You're going to end up dead. Just for being a conservative student, this is what you'll expect if you decide to speak out on campus. But it's not the first time, and it's unfortunately not the last time that we've seen political violence. Last year, many of you may remember this incident at UC Berkeley, where Hayden Williams was punched in the face. And why? You may wonder. The reason that punch happened was because Hayden decided to hold up a sign that said, hate crime hoaxes hurt real victims. But it'd be one thing if these things were random occurrences. One incident here, one incident there. But that's not what's happening. There is hundreds of incidents just like this one. But it's coming from somewhere. It's not in a vacuum. There's professors who are encouraging this type of behavior. I already mentioned Mark Bray, but there's also people like this professor from Colorado State University who vowed that she vows to punch political opponents in the neck. But there's also people like this guy right here, whose name is Dwayne Dixon from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He is the leader of his chapter of the Redneck Revolt. Just to give you a measurement of what the Redneck Revolt is, because I mentioned them earlier in that screen. They are a self-proclaimed Antifa group. And when a reporter, Kamel Bell from CNN, said that they did a mini interview with them and called them the good guys, he interviewed 4 people, and among them was this guy named Rob Sprosen or Van Sprosen. And a few weeks later, he was the one who started firebombing an ICE facility in Washington, and he was shot dead by officers. He's supposed to be the good guy according to the left. But Kamel Bell is not the only reporter. For example, last year when there was protest outside of Mitch McConnell's house calling for his bloody murder, saying murder Mitch, Chris Hayes from MSNBC had Eli Mistel, and Chris Hayes said, oh, there were peaceful protests. Well, Eli Mistel took it a step further and saying, no, I want to see more of this. I want to see people march with pitchforks and torches outside of the homes of Trump supporters or Trump donors. But of course, this is not the only time. The left-wing media thinks that Antifa is on their side, but Antifa doesn't care. If you start criticizing them or trying to find out the truth, you become an enemy, such as what happened to Andy Ngo. Of course, this incident, instead of people saying like, how dare Antifa attack him? Well, a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater had the audacity to say Antifa is a form of self-defense after Andy Ngo was attacked. Hurting reporters and inciting riots and firebombing Washington, an ICE facility, is nothing even remotely close to self-defense. Yet professors sit in their ivory tower and think that they are above hatred, above ill will, but they are not. They are spreading an anti-conservative bias, and it is hurting real people. Since this incident, of course, Antifa has been intimidated Andy Ngo. But before that, let me tell you a story about, there's this guy named, I forget his name, but Mark Bray talks about him in his book, and it's just to highlight how bad fascists are. Emilio, his name is, I think his name is. He says that Emilio in the 1920s was named the leader of his local socialist chapter in Italy. Well, after Mussolini's fascists found out about him, they went to his house and they pulled him out in the middle of the night, beat him to a pulp, and they told them, if you don't leave, we're coming for your family. And of course, this is despicable. We should never tolerate that kind of behavior. But let me ask you that question. What is the difference between those Mussolini's fascists and these Antifa activists who decided to show up outside of Andy Ngo's house to intimidate him with a cutout of his face? There's one difference. The only difference is that in modern America, and thanks to capitalism, we have systems like a security system who takes cameras and a better improved police force that deters criminal activity. But had Andy Ngo been in Mussolini's time, Antifa would have done the exact same thing. Antifa is not fighting fascism. They are the fascists. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop with professors and it doesn't stop with the media. There's also professors who support and defend Antifa's conduct, such as Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Well, when Boston Antifa started beating up a bunch of people at a peaceful protest, well, she started fundraising to bail them out of jail. But she's not alone. We also have people like Representative Asia Gomez from Minnesota, who was seen with Antifa as Antifa was throwing bottles, glass bottles at Trump supporters. But it's not just a couple of congressmen. We also have Representative Keith Ellison, the former vice chairman. At the time, he was a vice chairman of the Democratic Party. And you see him here standing with this violent manifesto. And I really wish I could say a former, as in he's no longer in office. But he got a promotion. He's now the Attorney General from Minnesota. And Keith Ellison, again, he was the vice chairman of the Democratic Party. He wasn't some random professor. He wasn't some random elected official. He is one of the leaders of the Democratic Party. And here we see him standing and posing with this violent manifesto. Antifa is not some boogeyman. It is a real threat. And we have to take them seriously because there's three groups that are promoting conservative, anti-conservative bias, and they're leading to violence against libertarians and conservatives. First is the professors, colleges and professors who are cultivating this type of violent ideology in the classroom. But second, it's the mainstream media who's promoting it. But lastly, it's politicians who defend and justify the violence. You know, I seldom talk about my story, but I've been inclined to do it much more because I've seen the increase of Antifa. And President Barack Obama has he said something in the last year of his presidency that I just love. He said, feel free to disagree with somebody, but just don't try to shut them up. I think the problem in modern politics is that we forgot just to be decent people, just to be decent. I've been an activist for about 10 years. And the one thing I can tell you that I've learned is that the way we bridge the political divide is to just treat one another as a person would treat another person. Because we are people, not political pawns. I'll tell you one last story. And this one comes from CPAC. I was at CPAC and I was interviewed by this gentleman named Joe Thomas. He has a radio show in Charlottesville, Virginia. Right before his interview, I spoke to his wife, and what she told me was amazing. She said that her husband was at the Charlottesville riot a few years ago, I think in 2017, it might have been. And the reason he went was because he's a journalist. He wanted to cover the issue so nobody would tell him about it. He wanted to be a firsthand witness. Well, just for being white, Antifa attacked him. They threw pee on him, doused them with pepper spray. And in one incident, there was an Antifa activist who was ready to beat him. And then someone stopped it. A gentleman named Hawk Newsom from Brooklyn. And he's the leader of the Black Lives Matter chapter in Brooklyn. Why would Hawk Newsom do something like that? I mean, he's a leftist activist. He's supporting Antifa. What's going on? Well, Joe's wife told me that her husband, Joe, and Hawk Newsom met once at another political rally. And at that rally, he interviewed him just like any other person. But after the interview, they just talked for about an hour. And they didn't talk about politics. All they did was talk about coffee and talk about just their lives. That was enough. That brief conversation was enough for Hawk Newsom to put his hand on Joe's shoulder and say, not him. He's cool. This is what we have to do to bridge a political divide. We have to forget that somebody else has other types of politics. We just have to treat them as Hawk Newsom and Joe Thomas treated each other for that 1 hour, just as people. You know, the crazy thing, I wasn't even 18 when I did all these things. I wish I could go back and apologize to that CEO. I wish I could apologize to the people's windows that I broke. I'm glad that I never got into a fight while I was in Antifa because that would torment me. I don't like hurting other people. But thankfully, modern society and our society judges you on the person that you are today, not as the person that you once was. So today, my job is to help conservative and libertarian students defend themselves and protect themselves against liberal bias and against Antifa because I know exactly how they operate. But more than that, I want to be a person just like Hawk Newsom and Joe Thomas were at that point, somebody who's just willing to talk about life and to connect with other people and forget about politics. You know, there's a common joke about first-year psychology students that say that they think they know the whole world of human behavior because they took an introductory course to psychology or sociology 101. I think that's what's happening with college campuses. As my mom once told me, some people, they become so educated that they just start acting stupid in their self-righteousness. Well, for a lot of you, you're only in college, and once you're out of college, you're going to be in just going to be in life. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. I made a lot, but don't let the one mistake in your life be silence another's right to free speech. Thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you for sharing, your story and how you're conservative now. And thank God you're conservative now, because I know you personally and you're one smart guy. So I would rather have you on my side than the other side. So with that being said, we'll move into questions. And I will remind everybody, we already have a few lined up, which is awesome. But I will remind everybody to actually ask the questions. At the bottom, again, I'll remind you, at the bottom, there's a Q&A icon. And you can just go ahead and type your question in there, and then we will address it. But Gabe, I'll start off first. We have a student who's actually an executive for Turning Point chapter at UNLV. And he says that he personally witnessed people come to their table and destroy their stuff and protest. He's also heard stories and even seen videos of people were physically attacked within their group, but the police never did anything about it. So if a group member was put in that situation where they were attacked on campus, they reported it to the campus police, but nothing was ever done. But they also have video evidence. What's some things that they can do?
So there's a couple of different things that you can do, but the one thing that you need to do, and I think you mentioned it, is to be ready to film. Because a lot of times I've had students be attacked, all of this kind of behavior occur, and the police doesn't want to do anything. And not because the police officers don't want to do anything, because they are more than willing to arrest people, but administrators don't want to deal with it. So it's very difficult to get away with it if you have video evidence. So it's probably one of the best things that you can do. Now, if it's pretty egregious, hopefully we can bring attention to it through websites like Campus Reform and other means. And I will personally contact you if you contact me. I'll help you how to defend yourself against it. But in general, I think that you need to document as much evidence as possible and put the pressure on the university, because they're not going to do anything until we demand them to enforce the rights of students and to protect conservative and libertarian students.
Yeah, well said, well said. And again, he mentioned, and I mentioned in his intro, he is our students' rights advocate. So if you have any issues that come up like this, feel free to reach out to Gabe, and his email is right there. We can help you through. Okay, our friend Woodrow Johnson actually wants to ask you a personal question. When it came to your time in Antifa, did you ever use any violence against conservatives that you knew were conservative? No, and then I like to add on a little bit. What if you did? Was this something that Antifa encouraged you to do, and that's why you did it?
No, I've never, as I mentioned at the end of the speech, closer to the end, I'm thankful that I never actually did that. That being said, I did go to some pretty tumultuous rallies that it's not as an effect, it's not encouraged as much as it is kind of expected of you. If you're rolling with the pack, you're one of them. So all of a sudden, if somebody's getting beat up, somebody's getting into a fight, well, you have to jump in. It's kind of a mob mentality. There's one incident when I remember at a protest, there was one of them, my friends getting arrested pretty close to me, and two people right in front of me. They kind of looked around. They saw the police officer on his own, so they went up to him. They pushed him, and one of them punched them in the face. They picked up my friend, and they all went back into the black bloc. That's kind of how it works. When you're there, if it comes down to it, you're expected to do it.
It's like a gang mentality.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alyssa Jones from Virginia Tech, she's a great student there. She wants to know, do you have any advice for bringing awareness to these issues on a more apolitical or apathetic campus?
Well, surprisingly, almost every single campus in America is apolitical. You'd be very surprised. Yeah, there's a lot of liberal clubs on campus, but they're a minority of how many students are actually involved. Students in general, they're apathetic. So the best way to get them involved is to actually start conservative clubs or libertarian clubs and do activism. Show that you're out there. For example, when I started a conservative club, there was nobody there. The conservatives were there, but I needed to fish them out. And the way I fished them out was by standing there with a clipboard. and just talking to people, doing activism events. And then eventually the first meeting was really small. I remember having 30 people and I was really discouraged, but I was like, okay. And then next semester, all of a sudden, my first meeting, I had like 26 students, 27, I think, students show up, and they were all interested in getting ready to really talk about conservatism, which is great. So almost every single campus in America is apathetic. It is your job to just start a club and host events, and host me if you want. I'd love to go on campus and just get them involved, because otherwise they're just going to go to class and then go home.
Yep, you nailed it. Also, to add on to that as well, if you visit leadershiపింstitute.org, you can find your regional field coordinator, and they can help you become more active on campus with speakers, grants, and other activism resources. Okay, so I don't know where this student is asking the question from or what campus they're from, but they said the Young Democratic Socialist is a rising force on their campus. Do you think they could be potentially violent like Antifa?
I don't want to speak about any particular one. What I can tell you is that I'm not the only person who's left Antifa. There's this person from Michigan who I spoke to on the phone at length for a while, and she told me that she was also in Antifa and she became a conservative. She has a surprisingly similar story to mine. She joined the Young Democratic Socialists, and everybody was in Antifa. They protest Ben Shapiro at one specific incident. And sorry, there's a notification. And they did all of these different things. Eventually, she started having original thoughts, so they chastised her. So I don't want to say that all YDS chapters are like that, because they're not. There's some people who are socialists and they're peaceful, and I've met socialists who are wrong, but well, I believe they're wrong, but at the same time, they're very kind people. And in fact, to give you an example, in the Hayden video, when he was being punched, there's a student who's trying to stop it. I forget his name, and I feel bad, but he's a very nice gentleman. He's a socialist, and he just stops by at Berkeley and just talks to us every time we were on campus. I don't know if he was part of YDS, but there's the potential for it because they run with those circles, but I don't think that everybody in YDS is violent.
Got it. And we actually have an anonymous student that wants to ask you, what kind of backlash have you received from your former colleagues or members at Antifa when you changed sides?
Well, the reason that when I changed sides, it's not like I did it all like I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
What I did was in 2012 when I was done.
Right.
And I was just hanging out for about I did activism, but it was very low key on college campuses for about 3 years. And then in 2017, when I saw the rise of Antifa, I wrote an op-ed. And then people were kind of questioning me about it. And I just was like, I don't want any of the attention. And now if the people who I ran with, they probably aren't even involved in politics anymore, because a lot of them tend to be younger in the college age. So I don't even know if any of them actually paid attention to me.
Yeah.
All the modern people, I've been thankful that I haven't received any nasty things or anything. But yeah, I was so far disconnected from them when I finally became out as an open conservative, because even my time with the Leadership Institute, a lot of my activism was very, very low key. It was only since last year that I started going on Fox and started writing more that I really became out there. So thankfully I haven't received anything. Hopefully I never will.
I was going to say, since you became out there, you haven't received anything since then?
From former colleagues.
Correct.
That being said, sometimes I do get nasty things or,
Got it.
I'm a conservative activist, so there's one time I used to Davis. There was this guy who tried stealing our things for one of my events, and he pushed me.
Yeah.
You still experience that kind of things as a conservative, but no one from my former colleagues.
Yeah, understand. Okay, so Skylar, I may get your name wrong, but we have Skylar Washman. I'm going to say they're actually she or he is a chapter chairman at the Young Conservatives of Texas at Texas Tech. So. Thank you for joining and recruiting for this event. But they want to know, do you think there's any way to have an actual rational conversation with a member of Antifa as a conservative?
Well, you have to be very, very careful. I would never advise you to, if you see a black bloc, which is when they're all in a black mask and everything, I would never go up to them and be like, hey, how's it going? Just like I wouldn't go up to a neo-Nazi with a rally and say, what's up, dude? That being said, you have to catch them off guard. One of my favorite activism events, a lot of people are doing it. It's the change my mind kind of things. I did one in where was it, in Massachusetts, and there was this guy, quote unquote self-proclaimed member of Antifa, who stopped by, and we had a conversation for about 2 hours, probably less. It was cold, but for about an hour. And we just had a conversation, and even though he says that he's part of Antifa, we were just connecting as one another, kind of like bouncing off ideas. You kind of have to pick your battles and know when to do it. My recommendation is to reach out. If you're a conservative club on campus, reach out to the YDS, to the LGBT club, to the, I don't know, whatever other liberal club there is. Not to have debate, which you can have, but say, hey, we're having an end of the year pizza party. You guys want to come?
Building that bridge.
Yeah, build that bridge first, and then talk about politics rationally.
Yeah. Okay. So we're only going to do a couple more questions, and then we're gonna wrap this up by telling you a little bit more about events coming up. But the next question I have from Layla. I guess I'm saying that right, but she didn't say what campus she was from, but it's a Turning Point. She's a Turning Point USA president on a very left-leaning campus, and their activism is usually blocked or destroyed, and rumors about their chapter actually deter people from attending their meetings. What can she do when she's in that position?
First of all, don't give up, because it's painful. So, I mean, I remember experiencing the same type of bias, but don't give up, because eventually our ideas will win. I'm very confident with that. That being said, is a couple of different things. If you think it's the administration, document it. You have to document it and try to find if there's a pattern. And if you think that there's a pattern, start asking other political clubs, both conservative and both liberal, if they experience the same type of problems or glitches or mistakes. If you can kind of establish that pattern, you can contact me, and hopefully we can get an attorney to look at it and maybe bring suit, or maybe just a demanding letter. They're getting very sneaky, because about 8 years ago it was pretty clear, all these professors, but now they're aware that we're watching. So they're trying to hide their things. So it's all about documenting a pattern of abuse, and hopefully we can, it's enough to show a court that this pattern exists.
Got it. Okay, so last question. Gabriel from California State University. She wants to know, how do you get conservative students on campus to become more politically involved? They've met with conservative students that are scared to show they're actually conservative. So how do you get them involved, even though they're scared to become, actively conservative out loud?
Well, that can be difficult. I've met some people that at multiple different universities: Berkeley, California State University, San Luis Obispo, Cal State LA, just a lot of schools. I've had students come up to me talking and just saying, "Hey, I support you guys." I asked them to sign up. They say, "No, I don't want my name on your list. I'm afraid of it." And that can be very disheartening. And unfortunately, there's some people that you're just not going to be able to reach because they're just very afraid. What I would recommend saying, look, we're all here. We're all part of the solution. Kind of join us and just show how they're not alone. There's so many people out there. But if they really don't want to be, put them in the email list or try to send them a message every so often. But what you really want to look for are those people who are ready to get involved, because then you can work a lot more with them and get them to recruit for a lot more other events.
Thanks so much for watching this video. To watch our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe.